In episode 28, Apply Virtualization and Trusted Computing to Strengthen Platforms, we focus on building hardened execution environments that rely on isolation, attestation, and controlled privilege boundaries rather than hope. Modern platforms rarely run a single workload on a single machine. They host layers of services, management tools, and third-party components that share resources in complex ways. When that shared foundation is weak, even perfectly coded applications can be compromised through platform-level attacks. By contrast, when virtualization and trusted computing are used well, they constrain how far an attacker can move and make it easier to verify that what is running is what you intended. The aim is to treat the platform itself as an asset that deserves deliberate design and ongoing evidence. The first building block is workload segmentation using virtualization, containers, and micro-virtual machines to constrain the blast radius of any single compromise. Traditional virtual machines, or VMs, give you strong isolation between guest operating systems, which is useful for separating tenants or critical roles. Containers offer lighter-weight isolation with shared kernels, making them suitable for compartmentalizing services that still need close collaboration. Micro-virtual machines blend aspects of both, providing stronger isolation than containers with faster startup than full VMs, which can be valuable for multi-tenant workloads or highly sensitive components. When you design the platform so that each workload lives in an appropriate, well-isolated boundary, a single misconfiguration or code defect is less likely to become a system-wide event. Segmentation is not enough if each workload image carries a full toolbox an attacker can repurpose, so you also enforce minimal images to reduce attack surface. A minimal image includes only the libraries, tools, and packages needed for the workload to function, omitting general-purpose shells, compilers, debugging utilities, and unused services. This approach makes it harder for an intruder to escalate from a foothold into broader control, because the environment does not conveniently provide everything they need. It also simplifies patching and vulnerability management, since there are fewer components to track. Over time, maintaining minimal, well-understood images becomes a powerful way to control complexity and exposure. Containerized and virtualized workloads benefit further from mandatory access controls and syscall-level containment policies that define what they may do even if compromised. Mandatory access control frameworks allow you to express rules about which files, devices, and resources a process or container can touch, independent of its internal permissions. CComp profiles restrict which system calls a workload is allowed to invoke, blocking entire classes of dangerous operations by design. Together, these mechanisms ensure that even if an attacker gains code execution inside a container or VM, their ability to pivot is sharply constrained. For an assessor, these controls are a sign that isolation is enforced by the platform, not just assumed. Trusted computing begins with hardware roots of trust, such as Trusted Platform Module, TPM chips, secure enclaves, and other dedicated components. These hardware elements provide secure storage for cryptographic keys, counters, and measurements that cannot easily be altered by normal software, including malware. ATPM can attest to the integrity of firmware and bootloaders, while secure enclaves can run sensitive code in protected regions of memory. When these capabilities are used to anchor critical security functions, such as key protection or integrity checking, attackers must overcome both software and hardware defenses. This dual-layer protection significantly raises the effort required to subvert the platform. On top of these roots of trust, you can apply measured boot, attestation, and policy-based admission to verify workload integrity before it is trusted. Measured boot records, hashes of each component in the boot chain, storing them in the TPM or equivalent so that you can later verify that the platform started from known good code. Remote attestation allows a verifier to check those measurements and decide whether a host or workload meets policy before granting access to sensitive resources. Policy-based admission takes this further by automatically allowing or denying workloads into clusters or environments based on their integrity state. This combination helps ensure that only verified, expected code runs in critical zones. Secrets, such as encryption keys, tokens, and passwords, should be protected with hardware-backed storage and just-in-time retrieval patterns. Hardware-backed storage uses components like TPM chips, secure enclaves, or dedicated vault services that rely on trusted computing primitives to keep secrets out of general memory and disk. Just-in-time retrieval avoids long-lived secrets sitting idly in configuration files by fetching them only when needed and discarding them promptly afterward. These patterns reduce both the window of exposure and the number of places where sensitive material is present. When secrets are protected this way, credential theft becomes significantly harder even if a workload is partially compromised. Management planes deserve their own isolation because they often hold the keys to everything else, from hypervisors to orchestration clusters. Isolating the management plane means separating administrative interfaces and tools from general-purpose networks and user traffic, often placing them in dedicated networks with stricter controls. On top of this network and logical separation, privileged administrative operations should require multi-party approvals, such as two-person control or just-in-time elevation that needs separate authorization. This approach prevents a single compromised account or rush decision from making sweeping, irreversible changes. For assessment, strong management plane controls demonstrate that administrative power is treated as a sensitive asset, not a convenience. Memory protections complement isolation by making common exploitation techniques less reliable or outright impossible. Address space layout randomization, known as ASLR, makes it difficult for attackers to predict where code and data reside in memory. Data execution prevention, or DEP, stops certain regions of memory from being both writable and executable, cutting off many basic code injection attacks. Control flow integrity, often abbreviated as CFI, and pointer authentication codes, sometimes called PAC, further restrict how code can branch and how pointers are used, disrupting more advanced exploits. When these protections are enabled and verified across the platform, memory corruption bugs are less likely to translate into full compromise. Even strong configurations decay without upkeep, so patching hypervisors, kernels, and container runtimes on disciplined, predictable cadences is essential. Hypervisors and kernels sit beneath many workloads. A single vulnerability in these layers can expose multiple tenants or services at once. Container runtimes mediate how images are launched, isolated, and networked, so weaknesses there can undermine assumptions about containment. Establishing a clear patch schedule, paired with testing strategies and rollback plans, keeps these critical components current without reckless change. Over time, this discipline turns patching from a risky event into a routine control that preserves platform integrity. Isolation within hosts is only part of the story. You also need to monitor east-west traffic and restrict lateral movement between workloads. Micro-segmentation allows you to apply fine-grained network policies that define which services may talk to which others, reducing unnecessary connectivity. Identity-aware proxies can enforce access decisions based on service identities and policies rather than just IP addresses or ports, adding another layer of assurance. Monitoring communications between workloads helps you spot unusual patterns that may indicate scanning, propagation attempts, or data exfiltration. A platform that treats internal traffic as untrusted and governed is far harder for attackers to traverse. Finally, strengthening platforms means being able to answer where your software came from and whether it has been altered. Capturing provenance for images and generating a software bill of materials, often abbreviated as SBOM, provide visibility into the components inside each artifact. Signing images and verifying those signatures consistently during deployment ensure that only approved, unmodified versions reach production environments. This practice integrates naturally with attestation and measured boot, creating a chain of trust from source through build, packaging, and runtime. When provenance and signing enforcement are in place, it becomes much easier to respond to new vulnerabilities and supply chain concerns with confidence. Stepping back, you can see a pattern that ties these controls together. Isolation mechanisms limit where code can run and what it can touch. Attestation and measured boot verify integrity. Secrets are anchored in hardware and used sparingly. Memory protections weaken exploit techniques. Patching and segmentation reduce long-lived weaknesses. And provenance with SBOMs keeps you informed about what is actually deployed. Each control supports the others, forming a platform posture that is resilient rather than brittle. For an assessor, this combination of evidence tells a story of deliberate platform design instead of ad hoc hardening. That story is what you want to be able to tell about your own environments. To make this concrete, consider choosing one control from this set to elevate in a real environment and then building from there. Enabling image signing enforcement is often a practical starting point because it connects build pipelines, registries, and deployment tools with a clear trust rule. As you define which images must be signed, how keys are protected, and how verification failures are handled, you will naturally surface gaps in process and tooling that need attention. Recording these choices in decision records and collecting early evidence that enforcement works as intended turns the new control into a measurable asset. From that foothold, you can layer in additional virtualization and trusted computing practices, steadily hardening the platforms that carry your most important workloads. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.